Right, we've got everybody in, that's good. Good morning. Welcome to Brooklands Concorde Delta Golf. My name's Alan, I'll be looking after you for the next half hour. Give you an idea how this works. We do an introduction here, tell you a few things about Concorde. Then we go outside to look at a few things underneath the aeroplane, and then we get you up on board and there's plenty for you to explore in that rear cabin. Then a video comes on telling you how we got this Concorde back here and put it back together again. Following that, you go for your exciting bit, your virtual flight in the front cabin. So as I say, it's about 30 minutes. You'll be coming off the aircraft around about 11 o'clock, just to give you an idea of timing. A couple of housekeeping items. What we ask you to do, please, no food or drink while you're on the aircraft. We're trying to keep it as nice as we can for as long as we can. And when you're sitting in the seats, please don't touch any of the seat controls, window blinds, things like that. Trying to get Concorde stairs today, pretty difficult, so when we break things we really have problems, so if you'd remember that, we'd really appreciate it. Lastly, you'll be doing something today that no fare-paying passenger ever did, so you're very lucky. You're going to join the aircraft through the luggage hold, and that means the taller ones of you need to keep your heads down as you go into the aircraft. We've got a one-way system working. You're going on the rear steps here, coming off from the front.
Wow.
Why do we have a Concorde at Brooklands? Well, 30% of all Concordes were built on the site here. And the sections involved with the forward fuselage, the rear fuselage and tail fin, and the wiring room. So for every Concorde built, all those components are made here. Then what happened, the bits for the British Concorde went down to Bristol for assembly of the aircraft in Filton, or across to Toulouse for assembly of the aircraft here in France. That's the connection with Brooklands and Concorde, and as you can see, a very strong connection. It just shows there was no complete aircraft actually built in France or Britain. It was this mix and match, if you like. And if you think about it, when Concorde was designed, it was designed in the very early 1960s. There was no computer-aided drawing in those days. Everything had to be done on a sheet of paper with a pen, etc. And of course the French were up to date at that time using metric measurements. We were still trying to catch up using feet and inches, and all the drawings had to be done with both sets of dimensions so to be understood in each country. But they got it right, didn't they? Because Concorde worked. Now, just looking at aviation history, if we go back in time, of course 1909, that was the first powered flight across the English Channel with Louis Blériot. Only 10 years later was the first non-stop Atlantic crossing with Alcott and Brown, and if you've been in the flight shed beside us here, you've seen the replica of the Bimmy that we've got in there who also did that journey. The aircraft in there did that journey in 2005, and it took 2 hours longer than that original flight in 1919, so it shows how remarkable that flight was by Alcott and Brown all those years ago. So that was 1919, 50 years on from then, 1969, what have you got then? Well, it's right out here, of course, Concorde flying at twice the speed of sound. Think about it, the Bimmy, 50 years on from that, Concorde, it's over 50 years ago since Concorde first flew. And what's special about Concorde? Well, it flew at twice the speed of sound, and that meant up to 60,000 feet. It was flying at 1,350 miles an hour. Pretty quick.
Very quick.
And because of the speed it's flying, the aircraft used to get very hot from the friction. Tip of nose of Concorde, 127 degrees centigrade, hotter than boiling water. Rear end of the aircraft here, it'd be in 1995, and of course, what happens to metal when you heat it? Well, it expands. So Concorde grew by 8 inches every time we went supersonic, and then contracted when it came down normal height and speed. Amazing technology. I think that can be accommodated on an aircraft with 100 people on board. And now this is this aircraft's claim to fame. First aircraft anywhere in the world to carry 100 people at supersonic speed. Lucky people didn't have to buy their tickets, mostly technicians and BAC staff. It still must have been nice for them to be able to say, I was on the first passenger Concorde flight. The aircraft weighs about 180 tonnes, fully laden, and more than half of that weight is fuel. Going across the Atlantic to New York, it used about 75 tonnes of fuel, so it was a bit thirsty. Imagine the aircraft sitting on the runway at Heathrow, the engine's at 4 pounds, reheats on, using fuel then 100 gallons every minute. Makes you think, doesn't it? Once it was in the cruise, much more efficient, better than 747, and pro Concorde people will say to you, well, compare it with how many miles per gallon you get out of your car. Concorde gives you 17 miles per gallon per passenger, put it that way. Almost sounds reasonable. I think it's a dodgy one myself. Now, if you've been a plane passenger, you've never flown on this particular aircraft, this was the first British production aircraft. It was used for route proving, crew training, hot and cold trials all around the world, and once that had finished, it came out of service. So it only actually flew for 7 years, this one. Right, let's go outside and look at a few things underneath the aeroplane.
Wow, it's a beautiful plane. I didn't know Concorde had a rat.
Oh yes.
That's the rat, the ran agent, not an actual rat.
Right, now you notice we do something here that you can't under the other aircraft, and that is stand up. Why is Concorde so tall? Well, surprisingly, the answer to that is Concorde actually wasn't that good at flying slowly, and the connection there is Concorde doesn't have any flaps or slats that other aircraft have to give this added lift at slow speed, so they rely on the attitude of the aircraft to create lift. Coming into land, what do? Rotate the aircraft back, angle about 13 degrees, and then the air stalls along the leading edge of the wings, goes on the top, creates these vortices that gives them about 25% more lift. Because that angle, of course, if they didn't have the tall undercarriage, danger of touching with the tail. And you notice right down the back there are those two little extra bump wheels to give that added security. More importantly, they're really to protect these aircraft engine nozzles, because again, those come pretty close to the runway on takeoff. They don't want to scrape them. Up at the front, of course, what we call the droop snoot. And again, when the aircraft's coming into land, what can the pilot see? Not much but sky. So the nose goes down 12.5 degrees, and that means they don't have to stand on the seats to be able to see the runway. Right, let's wander up this way a bit.
Wow, big tyres. Big tyres.
Yeah. Now I've got a little job for you. When you're good at counting, come on then. If you're going to stand over here for me, you see the little panel open we've got up there, and there are a row of dials. You see those? Can you count them for me? Got to give people jobs to do, haven't you? 13. Thank you very much. That's a nice lucky number of fuel tanks to have. That's the dials for the refueling point, the ground crew. 13 fuel tanks on Concorde. Nice lucky number, isn't it? And very cleverly they numbered them 1 to 11.
Yeah.
So I had a 5A and a 5B, and a 7A and a 7B, so they never use that number 13. Where is the fuel? Well, it is in the whole plane of the aircraft, so it is in the wings and it is in the fuselage. And as I mentioned, Concorde doesn't have any flaps or slats. They're going across the Atlantic using fuel up. Centre of gravity and centre of pressure is moving. How do they control that? They move fuel from one of the aircraft to the other to trim the aircraft. Things that do on Concorde you don't necessarily do on other aircraft. Engine that powers Concorde is the Rolls-Royce Olympus. There it is on the ground over there at 593. Similar engine that powered the Avro Vulcan bomber, but the engine in Concorde is almost 4 times more powerful, an enormous uprating of power. Problem is that engine can't accept air at supersonic speed, so they have to slow the air down. It's done in that long assembly, and it will be explained on a video on the aircraft, so I won't go into more detail about that. Aircraft undercarriage legs, where do they go after takeoff? Well, the legs shorten, doors open right here above our heads, fold inwards in the main fuselage. Keep the whole thing streamlined. All to do with speed, of course, with Concorde. So one last thing to look at, and then we'll gut up onto the aeroplane. And that's this little gadget hanging down here. Now we already know what this is. You've already told me what it is. Well, we get the school groups round during term time, and we ask them what that is, and we get all sorts of responses, you might imagine. And one of the more amusing answers we often get is, well, if you land on water, it's an outboard motor, which is a nice thought, but it's not the right answer. It's known as a RAT, as our friend here told you. RAT, ram air turbine, hydraulic ram air turbine actually. And it's an emergency device if they have a total engine failure on the aircraft. If you think about it, a few years ago we had Iceland throwing a lot of volcanic ash in our direction, giving all sorts of problems to aircraft engines. So that's deployed, rotates through the air going past it, and it provides sufficient auxiliary power to be able to control the elevons and rudder, so to keep the aircraft under control while again the engines restarted. So never used in Brooklands Concorde, but you will find that device on all modern commercial aircraft, not normally seen of course. So next time you go on a plane and see one of them, I'd get a bit worried. You've got a few things to sort out. What it does, it drives a small hydraulic motor which in turn drives a small generator, so it gives them some hydraulic and some electrical power to be able to sort that problem out. Right, time to go on board now. Just a reminder, watch your heads as you come in that door at the top. That's quite low. If you'd like to follow me up.
Exciting.
You're the shorty, yeah, I'm the tall
Oops.
Our friend used to be the HR manager here. She got married on Concorde. So
Oh, really?
went down the island here and had lots of
Yes.
people in here and everything.
Who was that?
Amy Canal? Oh, Amy Nelson.
Oh,
She was
okay.
HR
Yeah,
manager.
yeah. I remember.
7 or 8 years ago?
Yeah, a while ago now, 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It was so hot. They had fans.
Oh,
it
one
was
of
so
those,
hot in there.
Yeah. We've got everybody in, almost I think. So that's the luggage area we've just walked through at the back. So you can see how small that is. If you were flying on Concorde, it was really one bag per person. You would have never come through that door as a passenger, always the door at the front, because there'd be a bulkhead across there and a galley. So you had a galley at the rear, galley at the front, and then the two cabins, 60 seats in this one, 40 in the front, made up that magic 100 number. So what we do now is give you an opportunity to have a look around on your own. So point out a couple of things. Timeline over here is about Concorde development generally. One on the other side is about this aeroplane. Video screens, there are 4 of them, all showing something slightly different on a 2-minute silent loop. They'll all synchronise in a few minutes, then all tell the story of this Concorde. I'll pre-warn you of that, and then if you spread yourselves out, you'll all be able to see that comfortably. Notice there we've left the panelling off, see the outside skin of the aeroplane. Not much between you and twice the height of Everest, and the thickness of that fuselage, have a look at a 50p piece, so that's about it. It's pretty thin. So there we are, have a good look round. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Wow, there's the noodles.
Brilliant. Here's the first time this one flew. Was in 1994. Well, this one that we're standing in.
Wow. The pilots.
Captain, this is the captain's one. This is a flight test suit and then just testing it out to be on with. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Oh, it's a Lego cockpit.
Yeah, it's not what they call artificial horizon. It tells you if you're level or not. If you're in the cockpit, that's the only bit you'd see. So, you see, so that's really just showing you how the complexity of it in the electronics, really. And the only bit you see is that bit.
If this white line was in the red bit, you know you're straight.
Oh look, picture. This is the disaster. Oh yeah. This is a real picture. That's a crash site. Oh wow. That's the incident.
Yeah, that got there. This is what we were talking about on the way here.
Yeah. Very crazy. It's a bit low quality, but it's the picture of old times. So the picture's
It's old times.
The big picture there of Concorde
Oops,
is the aeroplane you're on right now.
It's on there. So it's tied in this one. Yeah, this did fly. This did fly, didn't it? This one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. It's from 1970 something.
74. Yeah. Yes, it was its 50th birthday 3 months ago. Yeah.
Oh, right. It's 50 years old, this plane. Older than Mum and Dad.
Oh, there's the Lego Concorde.
That's all the airplanes where they are today.
I think I might buy that. Not the actual thing, but into the shop. Yeah, oops.
The Lego version actually does have the droops in it. That's crazy.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger model than that
Mhm.
Lego one. Yeah.
Yeah. I bet that one's more cheaper.
This one,
So I did the way.
cheapskate.
Because they didn't have a computer.
I've been hearing things about Heathrow Concorde being moved somewhere else.
Which one?
The one at Heathrow.
Ah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, always moving that around. That's the video just starting, so if you'd like to pick a screen, it'll be the same on everyone.
The Brooklands Concorde was the first British production Concorde, the third built in the UK. Golf Bravo Bravo Delta Golf, or Delta Golf as she's affectionately known, opened the door for Concorde to enter passenger service. Like every other Concorde, over 30% of Delta Golf's airframe was built here at Brooklands before being shipped to Filton for final assembly. In the hands of test pilots Brian Trubshaw and Peter Baker, Delta Golf first took to the sky on February the 13th, 1974, at the start of a test programme that would lead to Concorde's airworthiness certification. The first flight, which lasted 1 hour and 45 minutes, saw the aircraft fly from Filton to the Concorde test base at Fairford to join Concorde 002 and Concorde 01 in the British flight test programme. Delta Golf flew to many locations all over the globe, such as Singapore, Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates, during a flight test programme that lasted more than 7 years. She was the first Concorde to carry 100 passengers at twice the speed of sound. Delta Golf was used by British Airways crews for training in the summer of 1975. Over 50 training flights were conducted out of Fairford before passenger services commenced the following year. The aircraft's final flight came on Christmas Eve 1981, after which she was put into long-term storage at Filton. British Airways acquired ownership of Delta Golf in 1984 and in 2003 offered her to Brooklands Museum for restoration and display. Inside and out, the aircraft had been stripped of just about every conceivable part, but with BA's enormous Concorde spares holding, it was hoped that most parts could be found and eventually refitted. The aircraft was repositioned to allow it to be divided into 5 major sections, after smaller items such as the intakes and wingtips had been removed and transported to Brooklands. The Brooklands built forward and aft fuselage sections were the first major pieces to arrive at the museum in May 2004. A few weeks later, the 2 main wing sections were separated from the fuselage and transported the 125 miles to the museum. The final piece to be moved was the central fuselage section of Concorde, on which the restoration would be based. It was transported along the M4 and arrived safely at Brooklands after journeying down the leafy Surrey roads towards the museum. Hundreds of museum supporters, as well as His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Kent, were present to greet Concorde and see her being unloaded. Although it would be many months before structural rebuilding got underway, the volunteer team set to work restoring key parts of the aircraft, such as the droop nose and intakes, as well as beginning to remove 20 years of grime from the fuselage and wings ahead of repainting. The museum's contractors for the rebuilding started work in early 2005. The first task was to reposition the 5 main sections so that they could be reattached. When the aircraft was sectioned, new production joints were essentially formed. Aluminium channel sections were used to rejoin both the wings and fuselage. Alongside the structural work, the main volunteer effort got underway to repaint the aircraft. The surface was prepared before being painted with the trademark Concorde gloss white finish. After the forward fuselage had been rejoined, volunteers refitted Concorde's famous droop nose. With the structural rebuild nearly complete, Concorde was airbagged to full height to allow the landing gears to be fitted, the first time in nearly 20 years that the aircraft had rested on its own undercarriage. A volunteer team refitted the outer wingtips in late 2005, painstakingly installing over 600 bolts to hold them in place. With work underway to restore the interiors and cockpit, the volunteer effort in 2006 began with refitting the restored air intakes and rebuilding the engine bays. Special teams were formed to repaint and then fit the giant Brooklands-built tail fin, which was fitted in the summer of 2006, topping out the main rebuilding programme. Due largely to the efforts of an army of dedicated volunteers, sponsors and contributors to the museum's appeal fund, a Concorde with an uncertain future at the start of the millennium had been saved for future generations.
Right, we're going to go fly Concorde then.
Yay.
You coming through, John?
Yeah. I'll stay back here, right?
Okay. Now, as you come through this central section, just have a look on the left side. There's the data recording equipment when this aircraft was doing its test flying. And on the other side, you can see how the seats changed over the years of Concorde service. Now, the youngsters are probably better to sit in an aisle seat so they can see the screen more easily. And just one thing in terms of photography, you're fine to take photographs at any time. What we do ask is you don't do that while you're watching the video in the front. It's just a copyright issue with that video. If you bear that in mind, we'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay,